they're 99% sure of, it goes wrong a lot more than 1% of the time, sometimes as much as 40% of the time. Choice supportive bias. When you buy a house, you make a big investment, you won't come away thinking, well, I saw a bunch of houses that were much the same as each other and I got this one, it's probably as good as the others. Even if you agonized over the decision, by the time you've made the decision, you'll think that the house you bought is far better than any of the others. It's a clear win, you absolutely made the right choice. Zero risk bias, where people choose to do away with would prefer to entirely eliminate a risk that's already very small, rather than make a large risk substantially smaller, but leaving a risk behind. The bystander effect, where when you're in an ambiguous situation that could be a crisis, the first thing people do is look at the people next to them, try and work out what the appropriate reaction to it would be. And of course they're doing exactly the same thing, so everyone's staying calm and assuming that's what everyone else should do. And thus you can create a fictitious crisis and find people who are on their own will be faster to respond and will be much more likely to respond than people who are next to other people. And illusory superiority, very important, which is the bias that makes us think that these cognitive biases happen to other people, not to us. It's a bias that makes us think that we're a better than average driver and superior in a whole load of other vague... people who say they're a good judge of people. You know, meet someone who says, oh, I'm a good judge of character, me. And just think, really, how did you test that? Because everybody thinks they're a good judge of character. And this is, again, I'm just giving a small sampling of the dozens of systematic problems with human reason that researchers have discovered, confirmed and reconfirmed by experiments. We start to get the picture that human reason is very much like a dog walking on its hind legs. But it's not really that it's done well, it's just that it's miraculous it's done at all. In particular, I want to mention this paper forthcoming in Behavioural and Brain Sciences by Hugo Mercier and Dan Sperber, called Why Do Humans Reason, which argues that in our evolutionary environment, we didn't evolve our capacity for reason in order to see the world better, in order to reach more accurate conclusions. We evolved our capacity for reason in order to persuade people of what we already think. And our attempt to use reason to actually reach new conclusions, to think through the world, is it's a kludge, it's an attempt to turn it, a faculty of our heads to a purpose for which it was, for which it never evolved. Which certainly explains a lot about how keen we are to defend our beliefs over updating them based on the evidence available. So this leaves us in a... Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say just a little point about evolutionary psychology.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things when people are making some reasoning and having a bias is it's to do with the cost of being wrong. So say you're out in the jungle and 9 times out of 10 when the bushes rustle, it's some other animal, but 1 time in 10 it's a tiger or something.
Yes.
The guy that goes, there's a tiger in the bush, all the time, is paranoid and wrong most of the time.
Yes.
Just making it, it's not a tiger.
Yes.
But making a false positive error and thinking it's a tiger when there isn't doesn't cost you much apart from your mates thinking you're paranoid. Whereas making a false negative error going, there's no tiger in that bush, might get you eaten by the tiger.
That's true, but if we were able to correctly say, well, it's probably not a tiger, but I'm going to run anyway, which is the correct conclusion.
Which is the correct
if we're able to correctly, first of all, work out probability and then weight it appropriately for the...
But while you're doing that thinking...
Yeah, you're being eaten by a tiger.
You're eaten by a tiger. So
well, that is the problem.
This is why all these things are thought of as mental shortcuts.
We've got... sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, well, that's an interesting point about probability. I mean, you say the correct assessment would be that there might be a tiger there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something I've noticed is that people are very averse to making probabilistic judgments. They want to think either it's there or it isn't.
Yes.
And
certainty bias, I haven't put up there. There is exactly a certainty bias.
I think also people are more persuasive when they say they're certain than when they say what they're honest, what a good...
Yes, I have tremendous trouble trying to talk to people about the future when I have to say, no, I'm not certain of any of these things. It might completely not happen. People just think, well, why are you talking to me about it if you're not convinced? It's like, well, the people who are convinced are crazy.
Also, I was thinking, you're talking about the research which is saying that rationality is to back up our arguments, which sounds like something which would have evolved over a longer and deeper level than a sort of flight or fight response to a tiger.
Yes.
Well, actually, fight or flight would have evolved over like much more evolutionary period, like plenty of animals.
But yes, but in terms of the whole history of evolution, like human evolution over a shorter short period.
I think that you can sort of apply the same things, but I think that people want, my guess is that the paper doesn't speculate, but my guess is that people want to persuade them because they want to say it wasn't my fault. That the first ever reason ever given, the first ever argument was it wasn't my fault. Yes, on my part, but it seems highly plausible.
Specifically, it was my competitor's fault.
Yes.
So we might have had that bias from fight or flight type responses, and then use that for more human.
But it's another demonstration of how it's kind of a kludge, that it isn't a sort of neatly balanced system that measures costs and probabilities. It's a kludge that works out most of the time.
I think that there is actually a more subtle point in the evolutionary psychology of reason as a persuasive faculty, which is, I don't know if you're going to cover Dutch books.
No.
But the thing is, if you knew that people were always going to take off running whenever you say there's a tiger in that bush, you could exploit that effect. So you could, whenever you spotted some ripe fruit, you could say tiger, everybody goes away. So in effect, a communicative act controls some, the people around you. And if you then had kind of a counter to that, which is to say, no, wait, tigers don't usually come out this time of day, which appears as a reason-based argument, but it's actually kind of a counterploy to the controlling ploy. So that's what I got from that paper at any rate.
Primates are absolutely capable of that sort of theory of mind, that, understandable.
Deceiving each other to a certain extent. Wow.
So a lot of the brain probably evolved to become better at deceiving people and then detecting deception and then persuading people you were deceived when you weren't deceived. And so on.
Yes.
In terms of time, it's 2:45, so...
Oh my god.
If you want to do the Bayesian theory stuff...
I promise you, when I timed it in my bedroom, it was a lot less time, but I was slightly running out.
Paul, I should have asked you for a probability that you definitely wouldn't go over half an hour.
Well, yeah, I would have had to account for other circumstances. I would have hedged that. Anyway, so I'm not... Yeah, there's about... In my bedroom, there's about 12 minutes left to go, so maybe we can get there. That is hindsight bias. So we're in a pretty sticky situation because we find there are all these problems in our own heads with the way that we try and think about the world, and we think, right, well, I want to straighten that out, but what are we going to measure against? We're trying to use our own thought to straighten out our crooked thought, but our own thought is exactly what's crooked. So how are we going to get out of this pickle? We need a straight edge against which we can measure our own thinking, and so I would argue that arithmetic is that straight edge. That it's so for example, in the first experiment, we can use the arithmetic probability theory. So we don't know which of these two things is more likely necessarily, but we can say for sure that this one has to be that side of this one. They can't cross over. And this is the rule by which we're able to say that we found quantify biases. It's the rule against which we measure the problems that are found by experiment. And this has got to be the rule against which we try and measure our own thinking and try and talk about the way that we approach these things. So I can't give a... Go ahead.
Sorry, Paul. Before I don't want to interrupt the flow, but before leaving the topic of naming biases, is it worth giving the disclaimer that you should always be put more effort into applying these?
I'm there. It's later on. I've got it. We've got that covered. I want to leave it to the end so I have more impact. So we're all, can everyone see this scale? It's a scale of probability from 0 to 100%. So things at this end are certain, things at this end are impossible, roughly speaking. So we're just saying a coin flip is 50%. A coin flip has a 50% chance of landing heads. Or we can say a die has a roughly 17% chance of landing on a 6. We might also say that Germany has a 40% chance of qualifying in this afternoon's World Cup match. But now this is a very different kind of prediction than the others that reject that entirely meaningless way to talk about probability. But I'm going to argue that if we're going to try and